So today we are continuing a chaga harvest that we started last weekend. As you can see, we've taken a little bit off, and unfortunately our microphone didn't record anything, so we're just back here recording what we did last week. This property is right next to our cabin. It's actually Crown land, and it's such incredible, beautiful land, and it is ripe and abundant with just the most incredible chaga that we have ever seen. And so today we're going to take you through harvesting the chaga as well as some other uses for it. So I'm not a doctor, will never claim anything like that on the internet, but it is very well known that chaga is very ripe with medicinal qualities. It has a lot of polyphenols. It also has a compound that can help combat food sensitivities, as well as the most popular, which is the anti-cancer compound within the chaga. So do your own research. Whether you prescribe to the medicinal qualities of chaga or not, it is a really delicious drink. And so we drink it for both pleasure as well as medicine. So in the recent years, chaga has become even more popular than ever before. And because of that, it's even more important to use sustainable practices when harvesting. So there are a couple of bad practices, and one of these is if you come up to an old chaga site, usually on a birch tree, and you see a big, huge, like rounded out gap where the person has extracted all of the chaga. That is a bad foraging practice because you're basically issuing a death sentence for that tree, and I'll explain that in a minute. So what you want to do when you're harvesting chaga is you have a couple of different options. The first is you can harvest about 50% of that. That's pretty widely, like a pretty standard way of sustainable harvest. Some people will say that you can actually just saw the chaga so that it's flush with the tree. That's another way to do it as well. We tend to lean towards the 50% way, just because why not be extra careful, but it's up to you. You can do your own research on that. Everybody has their own opinion. There's a lot of debate in the mushroom community. Is chaga a parasite, or is it working in symbiosis with the tree? I tend to think that it is a parasite, but in some ways it is kind of working in symbiosis with the tree. And here's why. When chaga is growing on the birch tree, it will in time actually kill the birch tree. But if you were to extract 100% of the chaga, basically what you're doing is issuing a death sentence against that tree because you've removed the chaga and now you've basically created this open airway for bacteria and disease to infiltrate the tree. Usually it has about 2 to 3 years of a lifespan if you extract the entirety of the chaga. Now, if you keep 50% of the chaga, even if you go and you kind of level the chaga in flush, the chaga is preserving this big open wound. And it is, in some kind of way, working in symbiosis with the tree to ward off bacteria, ward off disease, and this birch tree could actually continue to live for 80 years. So another use for chaga is that it is a wonderful fire starter in any type of survival situation. And the Native Americans all over North America, where chaga grows in their range, use chaga for different reasons, both for medicinal reasons as well as spiritual reasons. And the Dene, or the Denai, I'm not sure how you say that, they actually used chaga as a sort of divining tree. So what they would do is they would take a piece of chaga and would ask it a yes or no question. They would light each side on fire, and whichever side burned faster gave them their answer. So it was a really fascinating early form of divination. Something that sets the chaga apart from other mushrooms that you would commonly forage is that this body here is actually a big clump of mycelium. And so if you're going out and you're foraging for chanterelles, for lion's mane, morels, anything you'd commonly forage, what you are gathering is the fruiting body of the mushroom, whereas the mycelium for all of those mushrooms are actually going to be hidden underground, and it's this huge mycelium web that is beneath our feet at all times. But this actually is not the fruiting body, and so because of that, you don't want to go and harvest it all because the mycelium needs more time to reproduce, as opposed to a fruiting body is more likely to come up, drop its spores, die, and then continue that life cycle each year. The chaga, I believe it only grows about 1/4 of an inch each year, and so it's very slow growing in comparison. Okay, so we're gonna just harvest a little bit more from this chaga, and then we're gonna get back to the cabin and get it processed.
They're already chunked up.
So by the time we got back to the cabin yesterday, it was already dark. So we are actually in our home kitchen today, and we are going to be working our way, processing through this chaga, as well as getting a batch of tea on and making some tincture. Okay, so I've got the chaga here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to try to cut off as much of this black rind as possible. And then we're going to set it on a drying rack after we've cut it into the size of chunks that we want for tea. Because if there's any moisture left in the chaga, it will mold when you put it into your storage container. So this is the size that we like for tea, just little chunks that you can grab. And yeah, that will go onto a drying rack. So we're just going to work our way through the rest of this chaga. So I've got my pot here, and we are going to put on some tea. Usually you'd use a kettle, but we took ours to the cabin and forgot to bring it back. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill this up about halfway with water. We're just going to put a few chunks into the pot. And we're going to let this simmer on the wood stove for 2 hours before we then strain out the chaga and we can enjoy our tea. We're also going to be adding some pine needles to this because not only is it really great vitamin C, it also adds a lot of delicious flavor. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to cut it a little bit smaller and get it going into my mortar and pestle so that I can grind it up to a finer powder and use that to make our tincture. So with a tincture, you have kind of a couple of different options. You can make a really precise dosage, which is going to be more like a weight to volume tincture. But for this, we're just going to do something called the folkloric method. And what that means is you're going to ground up your herb, your medium, which in this case is chaga, and you just fill a jar up, and then you fill up the rest of the way with a neutral spirit. In this case, I think we're using some leftover vodka and some leftover gin. That's just what we have, but vodka is usually the most common. And so the reason that you want to grind it up is that the more surface area comes in contact with the vodka, not only the faster will your tincture be done, but the more medicine that you'll get out of it. And so what we're going to do once that's done is we're just going to store the tincture in a dark place for about 8 weeks. And I'm thinking I'll make another video just showing the entire process of making a chaga tincture, because you want to make something that's called a dual extraction, which is both alcohol and a water-based. And so it's a little bit lengthier than just making a tincture with alcohol. So yeah, I've got this ground down now to a fine powder. Go a little longer. But it's actually fun to do this. You could also use a coffee grinder that you use just specifically for herbs, but I don't know, something nice about doing it this way. The reason that we're doing the tincture is because not only can you get different medicinal compounds out of it with an alcohol extraction as opposed to just a water extraction, but it's a really great way to make a very quick cup of tea because it won't be super alcohol tasting in the final product. You can actually just add a dropper into some hot water, add your honey or whatever else you want to add, and you can have a really quick cup of chaga tea ready to go if you don't have time to brew a pot for 2 hours.
Good on a winter's day.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video. Bye.